it's a little after 4:05, so I think I'll go ahead and start. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Vim today. So what is Vim? It's a text editor. In general, I would say that my experience with Vim so far has been that I constantly improve over time. So I start out at sort of a slow pace. It takes a little bit to pick up, but then it continually has given rewards the more that I research and the more that I invest into it. Whenever I first started it, I decided to use it entirely for CS61. And pretty quickly, I got some ideas to, how it was used. And I think within like a week or two, I was faster than using my previous point and click editor. There were still some things that were annoying because there weren't a lot of commands that I knew then. But yes, that's why I would recommend it, because you just sort of like gradually improve. So to talk a little bit about me, so I graduated from UCR 2020, so a year ago. Now I work at Tesla Autopilot. And if you would like to message me later, you can find me on the ACM Discord. Ask me questions. So this talk structure. So first I'm going to talk about some of the design concepts behind Vim, what it tries to aim to do, and the language sort of like syntax. Second, I'm going to introduce a minimal command set that will make you faster than a point and click editor within about a week of practice. You're going to keep getting faster, like I mentioned, so it's a good investment. Senior engineers who have used Vim for 10 years tend to say things like, it lets you code at the speed of thought. There are 17 keys that you'll need to learn, but there's often visuals associated with them. I'm going to demonstrate them in terminal as we're going through this talk. And this is similar to video games. If you've ever opened up like a sports game or something, and they have like the overlay where it shows like all of the commands, there's so many of them. So it's really not that much compared to something like that. And then third, time allowing, I will discuss some advanced Vim optimization. You really only need to know these 17 keys to get started. And you can pay less attention when I get into the advanced content. It's really more of a reference for later. So just for some context on this, this was posted by one of the most well-respected Vim developers, Tim Pope. So he develops plugins for Vim. And if you're still getting your footing with programming, you're going to get a lot more value out of getting comfortable with an IDE like Visual Studio Code, using Unix-based operating systems and learning command line tools like some of the ones that I mentioned last time. Vim is something that I think you should pursue at some point in your career, but it's not important until you're at like an intermediate level, which means generally second year or up, or equivalent knowledge. One exception is if you're interested in competitive programming. You really should already be using it if you're not. It makes a really big difference. So why should you use Vim? As I was mentioning earlier, it's fast, and it only gets faster over time. It's embedded in a lot of places. So personally, I use Vim VS Code because I still want the access to the IntelliSense, and it avoids a lot of annoying config issues. There were times when so this talk is intended just at sort of like default Vim, like you apt-get Vim and then you just open it. And default Vim has some really annoying stuff that like embedded Vim usually fixes. So yeah, it's sometimes worthwhile to use embedded Vim, whether it's embedded inside of an IDE or something. And then also there are some tools that use Vim-like shortcuts. So there are some tools that allow you to like browse the web using Vim shortcuts. Like I made a one of my projects a while ago was creating like a task manager that had like Vim shortcuts. So another reason it's pre-installed on pretty much all OS X and Linux devices. So you just open up your computer. You don't need to do anything. At most, you just need to like apt-get one package so you're running Vim instead of Vi, which is the predecessor to Vim. And then you're just done. Like if you have a server at work and you SSH into it, then it's going to have Vim on it. Like you don't have to do any additional installation. all of the information that you've learned about like all of the commands and the keybinds, that will still be on the server. So some topics that I'm going to avoid, these are things that could be in a Vim talk, but I won't really talk about them. Why not plugins? So plugins don't follow you whenever you're on your prod server, and they won't follow you to ICPC, which are the programming competitions. Usually people, whenever they use plugins, they're going to try and reach parity with IDE features, which means having autocompletes, adding file browsers, which is not a part of Vim by default. I mean, there is, but it's kind of terrible. So Nerdtree is one example of a good file browser. There are cool things that you can do with plugins. For example, Vim, its undo and redo is actually a tree, whereas like if you use like normal editor and then you like do 2 undos and then you like start writing something new, then you can't like redo. So it has like a unique undo structure, and there's a plugin that like actually lets you visualize all of that. So like there are cool things you can do with plugins, but this is something you should explore in your own time. Like I said, I use Vim with VS Code, so I haven't really had much need for plugins. It kind of does all of the things that I would want from plugins, so I don't really know enough to provide any advice. Another thing, file browsing in Windows. There are default Vim ways to browse files and do window management, but these are often fixed by plugins or using integrations like VS Code. VS Code has its own file browsing system and Windows systems, so I don't really know enough to provide advice on that, but it is something you can explore later. So the basics. So the philosophy behind Vim is that moving your hands is a time loss. You don't want to pick up your hand to go use your mouse because that costs like a couple seconds. Then you need to like seek your mouse on the screen to whatever your location in the code is. In general, you should be trying to keep to the home row so you don't even have to move your hands from there. So some Vim users will actually rebind the escape key to caps because then they don't have to like reach their hand up the extra like 2 inches to reach for the escape key. So that's kind of like the thing we're talking about here. It's really heavily focused towards the center of the keyboard. Your computer should do work so you don't have to. So sometimes when you're using an IDE, you'll notice that like matching brackets are highlighted, but there's also a lot more information that is inherently in the code that your IDE doesn't do for you. So let's say you want to like take a section that's inside of parentheses out. Whenever you're using like a normal IDE, you have to highlight that section, and then you have to cut and then paste. But like if let's say your cursor is like already in the bracket area, then your computer should just be able to detect that, and then you should be able to instantly cut it just using like one command. You shouldn't have to like do the highlighting because you're already contextually in the right location, and there is information in the context of where your cursor is that does the operation that you want. Your editor should be customizable to your workflow. So of course VS Code has a lot of settings, but Vim kind of like was one of the original ones that provided this. So there's a Vim RC, which allows you to edit everything depending on whether or not you want to show line numbers, how you want indentation to work, whether it's like auto-indented. And yeah, you can just add anything there. And then macros, if every programming language has its own sort of repetitive tasks that you have to do. And so if you're doing a repetitive task, you can actually record those key presses into a buffer and then replay them. So that's what a macro is. So how does Vim achieve this philosophy we're mentioning? Just don't move your hands very much, achieve that contextual editing, and make it customizable. So there are 3 editor modes. There's insert mode, which you should already be familiar with. It's the mode that you're constantly in for point-and-click editors. The main innovation in Vim is the addition of normal mode, which aims to replace all of the usual mouse operations with keybinds. In normal mode, you can move your cursor around files quickly and cut and paste sections like entire lines or sections inside of brackets. Practically speaking, you will spend most of your time in insert and normal mode. Some special commands are preceded with a colon, like writing files, quitting Vim, and terminal calls. You can actually call the terminal inside of Vim. So this is a syntax for pretty much all of your commands in normal mode. There's going to be a count, an action, and a motion or movement. The yellow character here is the action, which performs the various changes to the file you're working with. In this case, D performs a cut action, and it's followed by a motion or movement, which is H, the left movement operator. You can optionally specify a count for your action movement, which tells Vim how many times to repeat the action motion. DH alone would just cut the character before the cursor, because H is a left movement, and D is delete, or cut. So if you do it 3 times, then you're going to delete 3 characters before the cursor. For the fast baseline section of the talk, you're going to learn, I believe, 7 actions and 8 motions. So these can be combined in any order and mixed with a count, which gives you this exponential size of things you can do. So it's really just limited by your own creativity. So I'm just going to show you sort of the most basic version of Vim. We only know a very small number of commands right now. So I'll show you, like, if you were going to use Vim with this small set of commands, what that would look like. And I will forewarn you, it will be extremely frustrating. And then I'll talk about, like, some of the issues that caused it to be that way, and give you some commands that fix that. So down here in the bottom left, you can see HJKL. Yeah, HJKL. So you can use the arrow keys in Vim. You're actually allowed to, but it's not optimal for the same reason I was mentioning earlier. It's a loss to move your hands from the center of the keyboard to your arrow keys. Usually that's like 6-8 inches. If you have muscle memory from Flash games like I do, it is perfectly okay to use the arrow keys whenever you're starting out. But of course, HJKL is faster. Honestly, I'm still kicking the habit myself. I only started to try not to do it like a week ago. So if I'm not careful, I might use the arrow keys during this talk. So let me just do a ls of this this folder real quick. So you can see I've got a couple files here. I can open a file by typing in Vim and then my name of my file. And that'll bring me into Vim. So I can move this cursor up and down using JK. And I can press I to enter insert mode, you can see here. And then when I start typing, it'll show up on the screen. So I can, here, let me bring up my reference. Oh, there it is, okay. So let's say I'm just gonna write some code here in Python. Okay, so that just works straightforwardly like how you'd expect from insertion. But now the part where Vim gets very useful is, okay, well now I need to like start doing some stuff with this. So what if I look at this and I say, okay, this print message is not useful. I need to change this print message. Okay, so notice that in insert mode, the arrow keys still work, but HJKL doesn't. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. So let's say like my cursor is here, right? To go down to delete the end of this this print statement, I would need to like press quite a few keys, right? You can see down there it's quite a bit. And then I'll enter insert mode, and then insert mode actually inserts it right before the cursor position, right? And this is not where I want to be because I also want to delete this last parentheses. So I'm going to use, let's see. Oh, it didn't show up. That's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to use A, which will allow me to insert after the cursor position. Okay, and then I have to hold backspace a bunch of times. Okay, and then I'll put in my new message here. Right, so to do this operation, it took a lot. I had to, hold my keys down a lot, and then I had to hold backspace a bunch. This is very frustrating to have to do that, and it's definitely not faster than a point-and-click editor if you do it that way. Now, let's say, okay, so I've got my code here. I want to go ahead and save it, and I'll do this command. So when I press colon, you'll see in the bottom left here, this colon. That puts me into command mode, and W saves. So it writes the file. Let's see, let me bring this up in the other tab. Yeah, so just for review real quick, so I type in Vim in the name of my file to open it. I can type W to save. When I want to quit, you can already see at the beginning of this commands list of commands down here. To quit, I do Q. If I have written something, then it'll try and stop me whenever I do Q. So print new message. So if I do Q, it'll say, oh, you shouldn't overwrite the changes. You haven't saved it yet. So you can combine W and Q and then quit. And then if you really don't want to save your changes, you can force quit, which is this. So going back to the example code that I wrote earlier, yes, X also saves time. It's equivalent to WQ. So here, let me go over a couple other things that are frustrating about this current version where we only know like I and escape. So I'm going to go ahead and open up another file. This is a very long one. Okay. In fact, if I do this and then type it into line count, you can see that there's 500 lines. So to get to the end of, let's say I want to insert some stuff at the end of this file, I have to hold J for quite a while. This is definitely worse than a point-and-click editor, right? You want to be able to use your scroll wheel, right? How long has this been? Like 15 seconds, 20 seconds? Yeah. This is not workable. This is really bad. All right, so I'm gonna quit. Go back to my demonstrations file. Okay, so let's say for this example code, I want to go ahead and print. I want to go ahead and print like for I in range 10. Okay, and then I want to print this this new message. Okay, so I need to change the indentation. So now I have to press all the way back here, and then I have to insert this way. So that's another bad example. I have to like hold the button down to go to one side of the text before I can insert the indentation. And then to cheat here and use some things that you haven't seen yet. So now I have a bunch of these, right? So obviously, if I just have one, it's fine to do this, okay? But like, let's say I need to do it for every single one of these. This is too much. This is not manageable, right? So we need to figure out a way to indent blocks. Let's say these lines down here. So let's say I only want to print 40 new messages. Okay, I don't want to print all this other stuff here. I might need it later. So normally what people will do is they'll comment them out, right? But I run into a similar problem here. I need to comment on a block all at once instead of having to like tediously do this every time. Because in point-and-click editors, you can usually just highlight and then press like Control/ and then it'll highlight everything. And then as one last example, let's say I make some kind of mistake here. So let's say it's like here, I write 1 too few S's, and then I realize it, and now I have to go all the way back up. I have to put my cursor in the correct position, and then I have to type it, which again, you should really become distrustful of situations where you have to press a bunch of keys. There's usually ways to optimize it from there. You could write all of your code this way, only knowing I and escape, but that would be very bad. So let's go into better ways to do it. Okay, so just to review some of the things that I showed there. So yeah, you can enter a file using this. W writes, Q quits. You can combine both of them to write and quit at the same time. You can use I to enter insert mode and escape to leave it. Force quit, you can put an exclamation mark at the end. And HJKL, you can use them in the place of arrow keys. It's a little faster to move around in normal mode that way, but it's not super important that you do it whenever you're first trying out Vim. Let me turn this off. Okay, so we're going to go over 17 command sets that you can use to actually go faster than point and click. So before I get into that, I'm going to have to show you some of the notation that I'm using here. If I have a bunch of characters in succession like this, like 3DK, that means you press 3, then D, then K. You don't hold down any keys. If you see these alligator keys and C in, that means you need to press Control in. And if you see a capital letter, that means you're going to be pressing Shift in. And so an example down here, this is like a longer example that I used for a macro at some point. And so you can see there's each of these individual characters. There's an escape key shown by this these alligator keys here. Some particular variable name. And then, yeah, this O is a capital O, which is important. So let's go over our problems that we saw earlier. So one is having to hold backspace a lot. So D is the cut action that we were talking about earlier. You can use Y to copy or yank. So that's what it stands for. And then you can use P to paste. So D, normally what you do is you combine it with a movement operator, but if you type just DD or YY, in general, if you type the same action twice, then it applies to whatever your current line is on. So you can do DD and it'll delete the current line, and then you can go up and then paste. And the paste will go to the line below the cursor that you're currently positioned at. So let me bring back up the Vim. So let me turn back on my key set. All right, so all of these commands here, right? I don't need these. Okay, so it looks like there's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. So I can do 7 DD, and then it'll cut all of the ones that I no longer need. But oh wait, I guess I actually did need them. So here I can just print them again, or sorry, press P to paste, and you can see all of those went into place. But oh no, now I don't need all of these lines. There's too many, so I can do like 20 D, and then it'll do something similar. 10 DD. And I just need this, and there you go. So that's how that works. Going back to here. Yeah, by the way, feel free to type in chat at any point if you have any questions. So each of these actions, D, Y, and P, they are actions. So you can combine them with any movement operators. So like I showed you earlier, you can delete characters behind the cursor. You can add it to any other movement operators. So yeah, let me just go into movement operators. So one of the other problems that we saw was we had to hold H and L to move on the same line. So like, let's say we had an error in the middle of a print statement, then you had to like awkwardly kind of like hold H or L a lot, so left or right. So these are all motions that you should know about. The opening of a line is the caret, and the end of a line is the $sign. And this is true also in regex and a few other technical tools, so this is something you'll see a lot. I and A are probably the most useful commands immediately after learning Vim. That allows you to insert at the start or the end of a line. So if you're adding to a function call, you might use A to insert at the very end of the function call. If you need to change a variable name or add like a prefix, then you'll use I. These I use all the time. In fact, you might have noticed I accidentally used A couple times while I was doing the initial demonstration, just because it's used all the time. It's very ubiquitous. So those are commands you definitely want to know. I for insert, and then A for append at the end of the line. These are capital letters, you'll notice, so you do have to use Shift with them. So Shift I and Shift A. Then again, in code, usually what you're going to be doing is changing access to functions. So you're going to be changing the inputs. You're going to be changing, like maybe you want to take it and then put it out and then put it into a variable. So for those, it's very helpful to know F and T. So these will take your current cursor position and search forward for a character. So if you type in like F open parentheses, then it'll search to the open parentheses, and it'll put the cursor on the open parentheses. So that's what it means for it to be an inclusive search. It takes the cursor and then it includes the current the bracket, and then T does not include the whatever thing you're searching for, like whether it's an open parentheses or not. So let me just show how that works in practice real quick. So let's say I'm here and I want to go ahead and search for the open parentheses. So that immediately puts my character on the open parentheses. And let's say I want to go ahead and delete this print message. I want to take it out and put it somewhere else to turn it into like a variable name. So I can use D and then T because it doesn't put the cursor onto the parentheses, and then pick the close parentheses. So now I've just removed the entire print message here. And then I can use A. I can add it here. I'm going to do I to go to the beginning of the line, and then I can indent it. And then I can add like a variable name. So this is like message. Then I can go back down here and then type in message. So yeah, you can already see like how it's getting much faster than it used to be. Going back through movement commands. So sometimes you're not going to be searching for just a single character. It's not realistic to always be doing that. So / will perform an actual search. So you can just type / in normal mode and then type in your string and then enter whenever you're done with it. And then it'll search forward for all of the instances of that. To go to the next match, you would press lowercase n, and to go back, you would press uppercase n. So just to show an example of that again. So let's say I want to look at all of these print messages. So I can type in print. And so there's one. I can go back to the previous print messages. And you can see there's no print anywhere else in the code. It says search hit bottom, continuing at top down here. So this is really useful for if you want to change like a variable name, because then you can quickly go to it so that you can start editing it. Of course, find and replace is still a little bit more useful. If you're using, there are some ways to replace it. But yeah, I'll go into that in the advanced section later if there's time. Yeah. So yeah, moving on to the next part. So the other problem that we were running into is I had to hold down L for like 30 seconds or whatever to get to the end of my extremely long file. This is bad. So it would be nice if we were able to just skip to the end of the file or skip to specific lines. Say, for example, if there was like a trace back that we wanted to look at. So that's where the G motion and the curly brace motions come from. So these, again, are extremely useful. I use these all the time. So the G, it goes to, if you do nothing, like if you don't type in any count, it'll go to the end of the file. But if you do put in a count, then it'll go to that specific line number. So you may have noticed that in my Vim, I have line numbers. You can turn those on by doing set number as a command. And then that allows you to perform a lot of useful operations with G. So I'm going to press G now. That's going to go to the end of the file. But let's say I want to look at this class summary stats calculator over there. So I can type in 30G, and then immediately my cursor, you can see it's on line 30 now. And you can combine this with any of the other operators, because remember, G is a movement. So let's say I want to delete this entire class summary stats collector and move it somewhere else. So I'm going to do D 42G. Okay, and then that deleted everything that was in that class. And now I can go to the end of the file, add some lines, and then I can paste my summary stats collector down there. Yeah, so yes, G is super handy. For the curly brackets, this is like a paragraph measure. So a paragraph is something that's flanked by white spaces. So if you have good code style, you're going to have white spaces in your code to separate sort of like logically disconnected pieces of code. So in this code, not that. In this code, you can see that if I use the bracket commands, it goes to the next instance of white space that's separating these. So this is technically going to the end, the quote-unquote end, and the quote-unquote start of the paragraph. Of course, since this is code, paragraphs don't really apply, but you know, you get the idea. So this you can use to scroll through a file quickly. And usually because you're going to want to use white spaces to separate sort of logically connected pieces, then it will usually jump from like one discrete part of the code to the next, and it'll be easy to get to the spot that you need to pretty quickly. So this is like my comment section for the beginning. Okay, well, I don't want to look at this example thing. I want to look at summary stats calculator, so I can jump past these. Okay, these are other sections that I was looking at. And there we go. Okay, I'm already down to summary stats collector. So that one I use quite a bit. And it saves the time of having to press quite so many like L commands. And again, since this is in motion, you can combine it with other stuff. So let's say this entire like set here, you know, let's say I want to get rid of this. There's no white spaces in between, so I can do D and then my forward brace, and it'll delete that entire paragraph. So I can grab all of it all at once. All right, moving on to the next problem. So everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes you'll mess up. So you can use U to undo the last action, whether that's a cut command. Insert technically counts as an action. So if you insert some stuff and then you're like, oh, I didn't need that, you can press U and then get rid of that. And then Control R redoes the last undone action. So if you undo something and you're like, oh, I actually need it, then you can use Control R. You do need to be a little careful with this. So R does R by itself does replace. So it's an action. And it'll wait for a movement character, and then later whenever you're like confused and you're like, why is it like this? And then you like press the movement character, then you're going to end up with a bunch of code being deleted. So yeah, don't use R by itself. You want to use Control R to redo. And if you press Control Z from muscle memory using another text editor, that's, yeah, you're not in for a good time. So Control Z, this is going to, on at least Linux devices, it will suspend Vim. It'll suspend the Vim process. And so you have to type in FG in the terminal to re-enter it. Vim also has another one like this. If you press Control S, then it'll freeze Vim. And you have to type Control Q to, to reload it. So the reason why those exist are for legacy reasons, but needless to say, don't press those. The things you want to remember from the slide are U and Control R. So that's how you undo and redo. So I'm going to go back here. So let's say, you know, I have this stuff. I delete it. I didn't want to do that. I press U and I get it back. And then I wanted to delete it. I press Control R. I get it back to not being there. And as I was saying earlier, I counts as an action as well. So that means you can do a lot of stuff with it. So you can actually combine it with a count, which is kind of funny. So you can do like 3i banana. Oops. Yeah, 3i banana, and then it'll type in 3 bananas. And all of that counts as one insertion command, so I can press U and then get rid of it. So like I was saying earlier, you can combine any actions and movements, and that's like a valid command. Okay, so now we're getting into what makes Vim Vim. So Vi existed before it had a lot of the features that I've already mentioned. And you know, if you're on a computer and you find that you have to use Vi, everything that I've said so far applies. This will not apply. So Vim adds something called visual mode. And visual mode allows you to actually sort of highlight it in a similar way to if you were using a point-and-click editor. So if you use lowercase v, you can highlight things on a specific line. So it's just like doing your normal, click and drag highlight. And then if you use capital V, it'll select multiple lines at a time. So this is still a motion, so you can combine it with other actions that we saw earlier, like deletion or yank, copy. So this allows you to see what you're doing. And it also gives you access to some special commands. So I'm just going to show this real quick, just so you can have some visuals for what that looks like. So here, let's say I want to delete these last two messages. I could type in, oops, not that. I could type in 2DD, and then I would get rid of it. But, I don't want to count. Let's say I had something like this, okay, and then I paste it like this many times. Okay, I don't want to have to count this. This is too much. Okay. So normally what I would do if I saw this in the workplace is I would press capital V to start selecting a line. Then I would press the curly bracket to go down because there's a new line pretty close to what I'm trying to remove. I would scroll up twice and then press D, and that would get rid of it in like 4 key presses. So that's normally how I would handle like using V. It allows you to not have to count, and then you can just kind of say, oh, this region that I roughly defined, that's what I want. So like I said earlier, this gives you access to some special commands. So you can use the greater than and less than sign to indent or de-indent a particular block. And this is really useful for Python where indentation actually does matter. And remember, one of the other issues that we had earlier was trying to comment out a bunch of lines. So the norm command lets you do that. It's a general command. It allows you to take your visual block selection and then apply a command string to the beginning of every single one of those lines. So here, I can type in norm, go into insert mode, and then type in the Python comment character and then a space. So that'll go ahead and insert comments. So just to show that real quick. So let's say I don't want to print quite as many messages anymore. So I'll go ahead and delete this line. But now the indentation is wrong, which will cause Python to yell at me. So I can visual select the whole area and then press the less than sign to move it all the way back. And then let's say, okay, so now I have these 2 messages, okay, but I don't want to print these 2 messages at the end anymore. So I'll visual select them again. Then I'll do norm and then type in the command I showed you earlier. And then it'll add comments out to the front of the line. And then later, if I want to remove them, I can do visual select again, type in norm, and then I want to get rid of the first 2 letters. So I'm going to do 2 and then L, which is my right-looking movement. Oh, I didn't type in D, that's why. You can see it moved the cursor to the right, but it didn't actually delete anything. So visual select again, norm, 2DL, right? And so now that uncomments. So if you're an astute observer, you might remember that earlier I was railing against having to type in long commands. And you would be correct. Norm is very long for Vim. It really doesn't seem like you should have to be typing in like 6 characters to comment and uncomment lines. And this is true. Vim does not ship with language info. Sometimes it'll ship with like syntax highlighting. So, if you open it up, you'll immediately be able to see like Python highlighting, like in my case. But it doesn't ship with a lot of other like sort of syntax info from languages, like the hashes for Python or the double slashes for C++. Or I think well, it uses the % sign. It's like LC3, right? So it doesn't ship with that language info. If you would like that language info, you should get a plugin or you should use an integration like VS Code. So every time I'm using VS Code, I just press Control/ and then it does it automatically. And it's correctly indented, which the norm command I just showed you is not. So yeah, generally speaking, you should. This is correct for default Vim, but really you should just be using plugins or integrations to make your workflow a lot faster. This one, I almost didn't include it, but it's so useful. I use it all the time, so I thought I might as well point it out. So this one allows you to, Vim will automatically detect the bracket context that you're in for your cursor. So you can see on this first picture, my cursor is right here. And then I want to go ahead and cut all of this inside of here. Maybe I want to put it inside of a different dictionary. So if I do di and then whatever my bracket type is, so this one's open bracket, if I is used as part of a movement instead of an action, so I already typed the action here, which is D, then if I type I here, it'll be contextually interpreted as inside, so inside whatever the next character is. And then I can type in another character, which in this case could be a square bracket, a curly bracket, open parentheses. It'll search ahead, and so it'll search behind for the open parentheses and search ahead for the closed parentheses. And then it'll immediately delete everything that's inside of that. And you can see that's what it did down here. So show that real quick. So Python, of course, doesn't have a lot of those. So I'll go ahead and open up a longer file. So I'm going to search using the / command. I'm going to look ahead for curly brackets. So you can see I'm scrolling through curly brackets right now. Okay, so now this is this item dict that you saw earlier. So here I'll go ahead and say, okay, I want to delete everything di inside of this, and then you can see it does that same deletion that I was just showing earlier. So where this gets useful is, like, let's say you have some very long print command. Probably got at least one of these here. Yeah, okay, so this print command is, actually, no, not that one. Yeah, okay, this print command is pretty long. So I can do, let's say I want to put some of this into variables, then I can do dib. It deletes everything inside of that variable set. And you can see that the previous thing that I showed you where I did like delete 2 and then the end parentheses, it doesn't work because it left behind one of the other parentheses. You can see this print statement has parentheses inside of it. So what dib does is it correctly detects whatever the current context you're in is, instead of trying to go to like a closed parentheses, regardless of where it shows up. And so now if I do di and then parentheses, it'll grab it. I can insert and then put this here. And then now I can say, okay, this is my message. I can search forward for len, okay, which is here. We'll put this on the next, and then this is my db data length. And here, do that. So now I can type something like message, db data length. And so the internal bracket context allowed me to quickly delete that. And actually, that's what was happening in this this alias that I showed you earlier, this like long command set. This is actually an alias I've used a couple times that allows me to do that within like 2 key presses, that whole operation. So yeah, dib or di, whatever your bracket character is very handy. Okay, that's a lot of commands. You guys might have forgotten everything already. So if you forgot everything, Vim ships with Vim Tutor. So if you type in Vim Tutor to your terminal, it'll show you pretty much all the information that I've showed you. It'll show you a slightly different command set because, teaching is a little different depending on who's giving the talk. But yeah, generally you can use that as a reference. And it's really useful because it's inside of Vim itself, so it's interactive. If you remember the name of a key, but you want to check the documentation, you can use Command H and then key, :H. So this is actually something that's useful to read at some point, regardless of whether or not you get stuck. So like I'm just going to open up Vim here. I'm going to type in H and then di, and oops, not that. Q to quit that. So di bracket. Huh. Okay, well, I'm just going to write di bracket. No help for that. So normally it's dib. So you can see this will search up the location inside of the help area, and then you can use that to look up all of the possible things you can do. So like DGN, next pattern search match. So if you do like slash, then that's a pattern search match. If I do like help I, then you can see it tells you, okay, this is the insert mode. You can put a count before it. It'll insert count number of times. I actually didn't know about that until I looked up HI, and then it gave that information. And then, like, let's say I type in this bracket command. So as you might notice, this second window that's opening up, it specifies the name of the file. So these are actually help documentation that is inside of Vim. And this whole file actually has a lot of useful information. So if you're trying to learn, for example, more motion commands, then you can just type in like H and then a motion command, and it'll show you all of this information. You can just read the documentation. And that's useful to, yeah, learn more and get faster. Yeah, so use Vim Tutor and use Command H. So this is pretty much everything I covered in here. You can see there are 7 actions, 8 motions, and 2 commands. Some of these kind of have like combined, there's a couple keys that are associated with them, but like, if you remember lowercase v, it's hard not to remember uppercase v. So I kind of mark those as being together. I and A do the same thing. They're just in different areas. But yeah, so these are your 17 commands. As long as you memorize these, you will become faster than a point-and-click editor. It may take you a week or 2 of practice, but I guarantee that if you know these, you can move very quickly. So yeah, just to show you again. So this I was mentioning earlier. I found out that the person who originally invented Vi, which was the predecessor to Vim, this is what his keyboard looked like. And you can notice if you look down at your keyboard and look at his keyboard, it does not look like the same thing. So a lot of these commands were designed with this keyboard in mind. You can see the escape key is where tab was. Control is caps lock. Control is above shift. So sometimes what people who use Vim will do is they'll actually rebind. And Vim has the ability to rebind keys pretty easily. Vim users will sometimes rebind the escape key to be where caps lock is, because you're never going to use caps lock during code. You're not screaming your code, So sometimes, they'll rebind escape to their caps key. And yeah, you can see like there's just a bunch of other changes. Yeah, this might provide some context for like maybe keys that you might rebind. For vimrc, this is a decent starter vimrc. It is a little bit oriented to people who use Python. But yeah, there's a lot of settings that you can set. And the vimrc is the same place you're going to go to change things about plugins, and I believe like enable them as well. Again, I don't really use plugins that much. So yeah, tab stop, that specifies like the width of a tab, I believe, or shift width, one of those two. Or sorry, shift width specifies how many spaces are per tab. Expand tab, that'll take your tab and then turn it into spaces for sort of like standardization. Auto indent, if you're at a particular indentation level and you press enter, then it'll automatically add like tabs or spaces depending on whether you have an expand tab to go up to that specific spot. No HL search. If you use search using the / character to go /, it'll normally highlight everything in the file. And to get rid of it, you would have to type in a command NOH, which is no highlight, which is very annoying. Like normally if you use like another editor, it'll go away, like whenever you start doing other commands, but that's not necessarily the case in Vim. So yeah, no HL search is usually useful. And then set number, because you want to be able to see the numbers so you can use your G movement commands. And you can like quickly delete things. You can go to specific spots in the file for tracebacks. Generally, line numbers are very useful. And I've also included a paste bin link down here where you can grab this. The vimrc file is where you would normally expect it to be for Linux, so you can edit it using Vim as well. So I just open it here this way instead of the home directory. Some other resources that you might look into to learn more. Let's see, how much time do I have? Oh, okay. Yeah, we're looking. looking at near the end of the hour. Feel free to put questions in chat while I finish up, by the way, if you have any. So some resources, Vim Tutor, like I mentioned earlier. The Vim subreddit, those are people who've used it for years and years, so they usually have useful advice. There's a cheat sheet here that'll show you a lot of commands that I've gone over, as well as a lot of extra ones that you haven't seen before. There's the fandom wiki, which tends to have very detailed descriptions of everything that are maybe a little bit more friendly than the help documentation. So cut and paste tells you like how to do that. If I search up like mapping, there'll probably be information about it. It tells you about registers, which is something that I didn't go over here. Practical Vim, this book I used for a couple things here. I read like the first like 30 or 40 pages. So yeah, there's a lot of really useful information in this because a lot of Vim guides, I don't know, it's not really clear what they're aiming for. What I tried to aim for is to make you marginally better with each command that you learned. And what Practical Vim tries to do is to take the commands that exist and like try to make it useful for programming specific use cases or like alternatives to sort of like common workflows. And yeah, this book is very good. I would highly recommend it. Yeah, I think that's it in case, unless there are any other questions. There is some advanced content that I didn't cover, but I have an outline that has all that information. So I'll distribute that out afterwards, as well as the slides. So yeah, I hope you guys learn it. I mean, it's such a huge difference. I find it really awkward whenever I have to use like a point and click editor for something, like if it's an online website. Sometimes I'll find myself like typing :W or :Q, and I'll be like, oh wait, no, I can't do that. Like I don't want to insert this into the into my actual code that I'm sending the server. So also lead code, by the way, has a Vim mode, I believe. So you can use it there as well. And since it's on every computer, you can use it for competitive programming as well. Yeah, happy to help. And if you have any other questions about like sort of more advanced usage, just feel free to reach out to me. And as always, you can check the help files.